Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and we're kicking off today's video, enjoy your weekend by the way, with an example of why it's never a good idea to be the first ship spotted in a battle if you're in a cruiser. It's not a fantastic idea to be the first ship spotted if you're in a destroyer, but if you're in a destroyer you can always stealth up or just pop out of detection range, and you're also a very small and fast moving target, which makes you difficult to hit. Battleships are fairly easy to hit, but they tend to bite back, particularly at long range. So even if a battleship is the first ship spotted, it's probably going to attract a lot of fire from other battleships, but many other players will simply hold their fire, because they don't anticipate being able to do a huge amount of damage to a battleship at long range, and they don't really wish to give their positions away to all of the other enemy battleships that haven't yet been spotted. But if you're in a cruiser, and you're the first ship spotted, well, why not shoot at a cruiser? Meanwhile, Kirov Oleg here in the Grosser Kurfürst has been leading his team from the front, which is quite unusual. He hasn't just YOLO'd in and been the first one to die, and he also hasn't just been sitting uselessly at the back of the map, preserving his health and firing high explosive at everything that pops into range. Even more surprisingly, his team have actually backed up and supported him, and as a result, they're doing very well. Leading from the front in a battleship when the enemy team have 5 destroyers requires balls of steel or the hydroacoustic surge consumable and lots of team support. Kirov Oleg has both of that in this particular batch. They've already managed to sink 3 of the 5 enemy destroyers. One has been spotted up ahead. The other one is all the way up to the north of the map and is no immediate threat. They've also managed to bag themselves 2 enemy cruisers and 1 enemy battleship for the loss of only 1 Musashi. So all in all, they're doing pretty well. And a 3rd enemy cruiser, that's Seattle up ahead, is not looking like he's going to last much longer, and is coming under concentrated fire, which is almost certainly going to make the 5 destroyers on Kirov Oleg's team very happy indeed, because that will be 1 less radar for them to worry about. Oh, excuse me, did I say the 5 destroyers on Kirov Oleg's team? I meant the 6 destroyers on Kirov Oleg's team. The enemy team only have 4. What are you talking about, Jingles? We can quite clearly see at the top of the screen that there are 5 destroyers on each team, or at least there were when the game started. Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Do you see the enemy gearing over there? Kirov Oleg can see him, that's why he's just popped his hydroacoustic surge consumable. Our first hint that that gearing may not be playing with a full deck was that he's just left the cover of his smokescreen and managed to get himself spotted while doing so. And he's remaining spotted in open water with no cover within the secondary gun battery range of a Grosser Kurfürst because he's continuing to fire his guns. But maybe this guy is actually smarter than we give him credit for. Maybe he's firing his guns as a big yoo-hoo over here to Kirov Oleg in order to make him turn so that he runs into the torpedoes that the gearing has already launched. But if the gearing had just launched some torpedoes, Kirov Oleg's hydro would have picked them up by now, surely. And then, rather than ducking into concealment around the island up ahead from which the Yamato is emerging at a range of 6 kilometers, the gearing turns back into open water, which surely must mean he's lining up a torpedo shot. And that is going to be seriously bad news for Kirov Oleg, because now he's unable to execute the turn to starboard and get in behind the island without exposing the broadside of his ship to the Yamato's monster 18-inch gun batteries. So if there are torpedoes coming, it's going to be seriously bad news for somebody. Luckily for Kirov Oleg, that somebody is the enemy Yamato. Although you could also make a strong argument that that unlucky somebody is the enemy gearing, because his initial torpedo salvo did so much damage to the enemy Yamato that the second torpedo salvo's damage was actually reflected back onto the gearing and he killed himself. Although that's not unfortunate for the gearing. I'd make the counter argument that that's in fact justice. Now, unfortunate is what happened to the Yamato, who not only took 5 torpedoes, but he's also flooding and on fire. Remember kids, never fire a torpedo ahead of an allied ship. Because like Mr. Hand Grenade, once you've pulled the pin, once Mr. Torpedo has left the launcher, he is no longer yours, nor anybody else's friend. And just when you thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, here's Runner 357. Oh, that came out wrong. I'm not saying things are going to get worse because it's Runner 357. Oh, you'll see. Just watch. Some of you may know Runner 357. He has been known to occasionally stream some World of Warships. He used to play competitively, and he's not a total stranger to Flambass or Isolate's World of Warships streams. Today, Runner is playing the French fast Tier 10 battleship, the Republique, armed with 8 431mm guns, in 2 turrets, one to the front and one to the rear. In fact, we're going to start off this particular battle by giving you a little spoiler. This battle is Runner's damage record in World of Warships. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much damage he does, but trust me, it's a big number. And the amount of damage that he does in this game is not really, and Runner would admit this himself, it's not really down to any particular skill on his behalf, but rather it's down to the sheer ineptitude of the entire enemy team. Seriously, I don't think I've seen a team who failed their way to Tier 10 as hard as this since the last time I played World of Tanks. In fact, you know what? Another mini spoiler coming up. Have a look at the team lists. Both teams have 4 Tier 10 battleships and 1 Tier 9 battleships, and that's 5 battleships per team. Where do you think you're going to find almost all of the enemy battleships in this game? Now, credit where credit's due, at least one of the Tier 10 battleships, that Montana over there, has managed to make it as far as Tier 10 in World of Warships, and along the way, figured out exactly what it is that his W key does. But he's pretty much the only one. See if you can guess where all of the other enemy battleships are. A couple have been spotted. They haven't wandered too far from their spawn yet. And technically you could argue that since the enemy team actually also have a pair of Moskvas, that the enemy team don't have 5, but they in fact have 7 battleships. How far forward do you think those 2 Moskvas have moved as well? At this point of the battle, as Runner continues to fire mostly ineffectually at that Montana, you can take a look at the map and see the dispositions of almost the entire enemy team. I think 11 of the 12 of them have been spotted, and they're all in one corner of the map. And they're all in that corner of the map because the battleships, with the exception of that Montana, don't appear to have working W keys on their keyboards. The Montana tried, and he's beating a hasty retreat, which must mean that he's completely alone out there and has realised that if he continues to extend on this course, he's going to die. And now, of course, he has an interesting choice, because he is attempting to retreat, but if he continues on that course, he's going to run into the island. So now he has to choose between running into the island or giving Runner a broadside to shoot at. And even with the shocking luck that Runner has had so far, if you keep throwing enough shit at the wall, eventually some of it's going to stick. And the Republique does have a very, very quick reload on its 431mm guns. Surely at some point he's going to do some actual penetration rather than over-penetration damage to that American Tier 10 battleship, and there it is. He's only done 15,000 damage so far. Remember, this is the highest scoring damage game that Runner 357 has ever played in World of Warships. So where's all this damage coming from, Jingles? Because he ain't done squat yet. No, he hasn't. You see, here's the thing. When your entire team, from the start of the game through to the end of the game, are all clustered into one corner of the map, and the enemy team are not all clustered into one corner of the map, that means that the enemy ships in front of you are going to have a hard time advancing. But the enemy ships off to the flank, Runner in the Republique, the Zhao and the Minotaur with him, they're not going to have such a hard time advancing. And if they're allowed to advance unopposed for long enough, they're going to find themselves on the flank of the entire enemy team. And that, boys and girls, is what we call a crossfire. Crossfires in World of Warships are probably responsible for more ship kills than friendly torpedoes. There's no such thing as friendly torpedoes, by the way. Remember, once Mr. Torpedo has left the launcher, he is no longer your nor anybody else's friend. But the reason why crossfires are so particularly dangerous is because you can't angle your armour against everybody shooting at you. It doesn't matter which way you turn the ship, you're going to be giving broadside to somebody. And since as far as the enemy team are aware, and they're entirely correct, the overwhelming majority of guns firing at them are coming from the north, they're not going to be overly concerned about angling their armour against any threat from the flank to the west. And that means it's fish in a barrel time for Runner 357 in the Republic and the Zhao and the Minotaur, who are out on this western flank with him. Now, Runner is not quite in the perfect crossfire position just yet. There are a couple of troublesome flies in the ointment that he's going to have to deal with first. The first of which is that Minotaur, who, while he did not just receive a spanking of biblical proportions, is probably not in a rush to repeat that experience either. He was probably hoping that Runner was going to sail through that gap so he could torpedo him, but we've seen a couple of John Wayne movies. We know an ambush when we see one. What do you mean, who's John Wayne? Seriously, you kids need to watch some classic Western movies. Anyway, the Minotaur is not the only problem. Runner has just been radared. There is also a Salem on the far side of that island. The fact that Runner has been radared and is now visible to the entire enemy team is not a problem, of course, because here's the trick. Here's the secret to minimizing the amount of damage that you are inevitably going to take when and if you get caught in a crossfire. You see these big rocky things that stick out of the water? Some people call them islands. And the thing about these islands is that if you're getting shot at from two different directions, and you get yourself close to one of these islands, suddenly you can only be shot at from one direction. Now, I realise this does sound like an incredibly simple concept, and I don't wish to appear condescending. However, this concept, while only slightly more advanced than the idea of pressing your W key every now and then, does appear to be beyond the grasp of the overwhelming majority of the enemy team, 11 of whom, I should remind you, are sailing tier 10 ships. Oh, Runner's just been spotted. I guarantee you that's the Minotaur. 100%, no question about it. And I'm not just saying that because I've already watched the replay. It was obviously going to be the Minotaur. Once again, trying to get the torpedoes away. And with the Minotaur removed, and the Salem has actually managed to sail himself out of position, so cannot do anything about the slaughter that is about to commence, Runner 357 now finds himself with the broadsides of the entire enemy team to shoot at, some of whom don't even have their engines running. That Yamato is stationary, dead in the water, broadside on, to a Republic's 431mm guns. They all knew he was coming. He's been detected the entire way, first by the Montana, then by the Moskva, then by the Minotaur, then by the Salem's radar, then by the Minotaur again, and not one of them even have their guns pointing in this direction. One of them did target him briefly and then appeared to think, nah, it's only a tier 10 battleship. What harm could he possibly do? Oh, here it comes. Right, the Moskva is actually paying attention. Well, hooray. Unfortunately for the Moskva, Runner has now identified him as the biggest threat, since nobody else is shooting at him. And you're broadside on to a Republic. Let me know how that works out for you. The Izumo is actually charging Runner down at the moment, but he's quite content to just bow on towards the Izumo. And I think at this point, Runner was thinking, well, yep, here I am, in open water. He's killed the Moskva, but there's a whole bunch of enemy ships, all of which should be shooting at him. Almost none of which are, other than the Izumo. So he'd anticipated at this point he was basically going to have to ram the Izumo and then at least attempt to finish off as many other ships with his guns as he possibly could. That was his initial thinking, but then he sank another one. And now he's thinking to himself, maybe the ram isn't such a good idea. Because, let's not forget, all of the Izumo's guns are in the front, so if he can get around behind him, he can shoot up the targets ahead of him without fear of taking any damage from the Izumo. So he revised his plans at this point, but then it turned out, well, he didn't really need to, because this happened. 298,000 damage, by the way. Remember, earlier on we were thinking, where's all this damage coming from? He's only done 15,000. And oh look, that's another. He doesn't even have his guns pointing at him. I mean, seriously, what the actual fuck? I mean, frankly, this team just deserved everything that happened to it. That was comical. The only surviving ship on the enemy team. Let's not forget, just 5 minutes ago, only 3 of the enemy ships had been sunk. But this is what happens when you allow yourself to get caught in a crossfire. The only surviving enemy ship, and let's not forget, 10 of the 12 ships on the enemy team were tier 10s. And the last surviving ship on the enemy team is the tier 8 destroyer. And also, let's not forget, because it's also worth pointing out that tier 8 destroyer, the Kagero, in a match with 10 tier 10s on both teams and 1 tier 9 on both teams, he's got 2 kills. In fact, those 2 kills are double the kill total of the entire rest of his team put together. Is it any wonder this team failed so incredibly hard? I kind of feel sorry for the Kagero. I mean, I hope he survives, but there's very little chance that that's going to happen. Yeah, there he is. I mean, he was always going to be in the middle of the pack because he was completely surrounded and there was nowhere for him to run to. You poor bastard. And that, boys and girls, is the most damage Runner 357 has ever done in a game of World of Warships. 16 citadels, 341,000 damage and 5 kills. Runner would like it to be known that it was all down to his superb World of Warships playing skills. But, well, we all know the truth. He's good, but he's not that good. That one was all down to the enemy team. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to everybody who sent their replays in. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.